What psychedelics can do is to pull the curtain, pull off the blinders, and allow us to experience things which we don't normally experience. Some people call these plant compounds hallucinogens, and I strongly disagree with that definition. A hallucination is like the depiction, if you're really drunk, of seeing pink elephants, dancing around you. Are those pink elephants really there? Doubtfully. Whereas psychedelics actually allow you to see something that's not there, but something that you don't otherwise see. And seeing these unseen things gives us a broader perspective of the world around us and indeed of ourselves.
To teach you about the topic of psychedelic shamanism, today's featured guest is actually my father, John Finch, who's been using and studying medicinal herbs for more than 38 years, completing professional training in 1984 with the great folkloric herbalist Rosemary Gladstar. A master teacher and medicine maker, John makes great natural products with herbs, writes for publication, and has been a guest on radio and TV presentations. He teaches field identification of herbs, herbal medicine, holistic nutrition, and shamanism. He's also co-founder of the Self-Heal School of Herbal Studies and Healing in Ocean Beach, a small coastal community in San Diego, California. And before we get into this interview, I just want to do a really crystal clear disclaimer. This is information and it's not a prescription for people to go out and do. This is information, and based on this information, you can go learn more about this topic, and there's plenty of ways to do the things talked about in this session legally. And without further ado, let me now present my dad. Thanks for coming on the show a second time, Dad. The first time we had you on was epic.
Thanks for inviting me again.
And today, you're going to be teaching the audience about psychedelic shamanism and teaching me as well, because I know some about it, but not a lot. So what the heck is psychedelic shamanism? How has it helped you and transformed your life? And just start going off on it.
Yeah, well, first of all, the word shaman derives from a Russian concept about the interaction between people and spirit and connecting with that spirit. And it's my belief that a lot of what's wrong with the world today, especially in our what we call modern society, is our disconnection from the spirit world, the spirit of the earth, the spirit of plants, and getting down to it, our own spirit. A lot of our dis-ease is a result of this disconnection. And shamanism is a way to form that connection again, to reconnect with animal spirits, plant spirits, earth spirits, and ultimately our own spirit. So psychedelic shamanism, psychedelic means psyche is our psyche, it's our mind, and it's mind expanding. So we receive, according to the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, like 20 million sensory inputs at any given time. And yet, because of our biases, we have blinders that filter out most of those. Out of those 20 million, we receive at any given time about 2 million, which sounds like a lot. But what it's not understanding is that we're not getting that 18 million. So what psychedelics can do is to pull the curtain, pull off the blinders, and allow us to experience things which we don't normally experience. So some people call these plant compounds hallucinogens, and I strongly disagree with that definition. A hallucination is like the depiction, if you're really drunk, of seeing pink elephants, dancing around you. Are those pink elephants really there? Doubtfully. Whereas psychedelics actually allow you to see something that's not there, but something that you don't otherwise see. And seeing these unseen things gives us a broader perspective of the world around us and indeed of ourselves. So, when Jane, your mom, my partner, heard you were doing an interview with me on psychedelics, she says, "Oh, drugs." And I reminded her that the word drug derives from the Dutch word droog, which means dried. In fact, over 80% of the people in the world today, as well as all the animals of the world, rely on plants as their primary medicine. And of course, when you grow a plant, a medicinal plant, you can use it fresh, but after that you have to dry it properly to be able to use it for the rest of the year. So in fact, people are using dried plants, drugs, as their primary medicine. And I know the word drug can have a very negative connotation, as can, psychedelic. But the psychedelic experience is what can return us to our experience of our true self and our true connection to the world around us, so that we don't feel so isolated, so that we don't feel so disconnected. It's like a teenager might say, "Oh, I finally got my own room," right? And so what are they doing? They're actually in isolation. The worst thing we can do to somebody as a punishment, besides killing them, is solitary confinement. And yet that's how we live a lot of our life, separated from the world around us, from the people around us, and indeed from our true self within. And again, that disconnection is what is the main cause of our dis-ease. And so re-establishing that connection is what can connect us again and get us into ease and comfort and understanding who we really are and our relationship to other people and the world around us. I was born on the day we dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, where millions of people were killed really needlessly. We dropped another bomb on Hiroshima a few days previous, and we hurried up to drop the second bomb so we could test it while we were still at war with Japan, which I consider criminal. But this is the day I was brought into this world where millions of people were, screaming out the other way. I came into this world and wondering, what the heck am I doing here? In this competitive society, whereas all the plants in nature seem to exist in a natural balance and harmony. People are not. They are at war with each other because ultimately they are at war with themselves within. And that war is a result of not understanding your true self, which is in fact divine. We are not a part of God, we are God. And we, in our religions, we worship a God that's outside of ourselves, somewhere else. And yet that God, G-O-D, generator, operator, destroyer, is in fact the energy that is in all things. In the Bible it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And of all these of this all things were made. A different way of saying it by physicists is energy. Energy cannot be created and cannot be destroyed. It only changes forms. And of this all things are made. So the energy that animates us, life force, elan vital, is in fact that creative force. But we're not experiencing that on a daily basis. When religions pray, they pray to something outside themselves. What I've learned to do, and many people that I know, is to connect with that within ourselves and understand, and not just understand, but experience directly that connection. And that's one way of establishing that connection. Psychedelic shamanism is about plants that have traditionally been used by cultures throughout history for thousands of years that alter our consciousness in such a way that we're able to experience the spirit world, including the spirit within ourselves. And when I first started taking plant substances, I played in a rock and roll band, and my bandmates turned me on to mescaline first, which comes from various forms of cactus. And it was an amazing experience. A week later, we jammed again, and they said, "Would you like to try that again?" And I said, "Yeah, that was great." And they gave me something else. And after a little while, they said, "We gave you LSD." And I said, "Thank you," because of the experience that I was having. And that changed my life forever, really. It wasn't the last time I took LSD by any means, or mescaline for that matter. I've also taken morning glory seed extract, which is like LSD. I've taken other forms of plant medicines, is what traditional cultures call them. And they call that medicine because it's a medicine for the spirit, reestablishing that connection with our true self, which has great, great benefit. In fact, they've done studies. I live in San Diego here. They've done studies with, this was done years ago, with groups of school children that were having behavioral and learning disability problems, and they gave them mushrooms, psilocybin, which is another, I call it entheogen, God within, connecting you with God within. And they found that, in fact, it did have a profound effect on their both learning ability and their behavior, very much to the positive. I used to grow mushrooms, and the psychedelic mushrooms, and I've taken them growing in the wild as well. And they, like I say, they just open that doorway. They pull back that curtain. They let you experience something that you otherwise don't experience. Carlos Castaneda wrote a book about Don Juan called A Separate Reality. And it's that separate reality is what I would actually determine to be a more true reality than the paradigm that we exist in this Western civilization, which really paints us into a corner in many ways about our true identity and our relationship with other people and nature. And I'm not advocating the use of any of these plant substances, although I believe that mushrooms are going to become legal, much as marijuana is gaining acceptance as a beneficial medicinal substance, because they do have a positive effect on our psyches, our emotions, and our interactions. And I teach a course called Psychedelic Shamanism in our school, Self-Heal School. And what I share with people is that many shamans, modern shamans, Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, basically will say that you don't need these plant substances to achieve these states of consciousness. And if you would ask them, well, did you? And they would say, yes, I did. But they have also taught many people since then a way to achieve that without these substances. So I also practice a form of meditation that I learned in 1971 from my spiritual teacher, Prem Rawat. And I'm able to achieve that experience within through that means. I've even tried doing that on LSD before, but I actually found that it was better without the LSD, a little bit clearer gateway through there. But the thing is with these substances, you have to approach them with great reverence. These are not toys. A lot of people take these recreationally, and I'm not saying I haven't. I have actually taken mescaline and gone seen the Allman Brothers, for example. That was great. I mean, I was a rock drummer for 20 years, and I've played concerts before on LSD and smoking pot, and it was great fun. But the more advantageous use of these entheogens, these psychedelics, is if you do it to gain insight. So what I call set and setting is really the most important part of your psychedelic experience. If you have the intention, set the intention that you want to gain experience, inner knowledge, peace with yourself and the world around you, then you're more likely to have that experience than if you just take it without setting that intention. And the other thing is, if you're taking substances that you haven't taken before, I strongly advise that you only do it if you're in a fairly positive state of mind and emotional balance. It's not something you're going to dig yourself out of a funk with necessarily. If you're in a funk, it may amplify that. Mm-hmm. And that's not such a fun experience. I can tell you that from direct experience. But if you set the intention to gain more knowledge and connection, and ideally you don't do it in like a 7-Eleven. You don't do it, in downtown, where everybody's milling around and pretty crazy.
Where you can get arrested?
Well, possibly. I actually have been in a 7-Eleven before when I was tripping, and it's a eye-opening experience because the people around you can actually see how unconscious they are. It's almost like you're in a herd of cattle, and they're just like kind of herd, mentality, and not the greatest experience. But I've had these experiences in nature. That's the most ideal situation. Somewhere away from the madding crowd, somewhere where you're just by yourself or with somebody that you trust in a more natural setting, and not so influenced by the psychic craziness of all the people around you. The other thing is that it's better to start with a very small amount. One thing I teach in my class is called doubling. In other words, we did a field trip with our school, and on that field trip, I had told my students that we could experience morning glory. Not morning glory. Toloache, the Jimsonweed that grows here in San Diego, which the Kumeyaay, the native peoples here, have used for thousands of years as a rites of passage herb. And I had experimented with a little bit of it before, smoking the leaf, but the root is the part that contains the most powerful compounds. And so we did the herb walk, and we made a tea of the root, and I hadn't done it before. So what I did is I took a teaspoonful of the tea, and I waited an hour. And I didn't expect to experience anything, and in fact, I didn't. That was my intention, to just say hello to it. And after that, I took 2 teaspoons, twice as much, and waited an hour. That's about how long it takes to come onto it. And then I began to feel it a little bit, and so then I took a tablespoon, twice as much as I had previously taken. And so now I had taken 2 tablespoons, 1 fluid ounce. I continued this process for about 4 hours until I had taken 4 ounces, a half a cup. And by then, I was feeling really the effects of the entheogen. And in fact, we were kind of running down the mountain that we were on, like we were airplanes going to take off. And Carlos Castaneda was talking about in Don Juan that in Mexico, the shaman down there used that as a flying compound. And I could really feel that if we did more of that, we might actually be able to fly. Although technically I think it's more spirit flight than physical. But it felt really pretty good. I stopped there. I could have taken more, but I was okay where I was. And I felt like I could always do more unless it killed me. And then that opportunity would not be there. So I stopped there. In fact, at the campfire that night, made some popcorn. And I started choking on the popcorn because it really dries your throat out. I spit it out and didn't do that anymore. Drank a bunch of water. And I actually was tripping all night. It was pretty amazing experience. My friend Russell, who's 6'8", so he's bigger than me and would need more medicine, but he drank 2 cups. And his girlfriend was up all night with a spray bottle, spraying the back of his throat, or he would have died.
Jeez.
Yeah. He was not able to drive for 2 or 3 days after that because he was seeing spots and seeing double. I probably would not do that herb again personally. It just, wasn't one of my favorites. I have not really taken any of that kind of substance for about 10 years now. So most of my experience with these things, when I was a little younger. I'm 75 right now. And so I gained my access to those realms through meditation and relaxation and guided visualizations and affirmations. But I do teach people about the use of these substances because I find that there is a great interest in this. And indeed, I feel there's a great need for this to be understood by people and in a proper setting and understanding to be used by people, like it is used by most primitive cultures around the world, what we call primitive. Use these substances. The Native Americans, like I said, the ones here in San Diego used the Jimsonweed, the toloache. Other tribes in America used the Peyote. And, I've read accounts that Jesus, in fact, when he was a carpenter. Okay, this was a dude. He was a carpenter. He worked with his hands. He worked with wood. Jesus of Nazareth. So what converted him from Jesus of Nazareth into Jesus Christ, the Anointed One? Well, there's some evidence that he actually traveled to the East and got into some of these metaphysical things, but possibly also into some entheogens. Took some substances that actually opened him up to the experience of the God within himself and led him to be a teacher of other people and leading them in what he called the path of righteousness. So I feel throughout history there have been many shamans who have helped people to what I call cross this bridge between our normal waking consciousness and the higher realms of consciousness, which we are mostly cut off for because of social norms, our blinders, as I called them. And once we are able to remove those, and there's no problem removing them slowly. You don't have to rip them off. It's like, hoo-hoo. I did honestly at some point in my, experiences take 20 or 30 hits of acid at a time. In those days, the acid was clean, and it was, the guy I got it from took 200 hits at one time and drove his Porsche on a full moon. I crashed it. But he came out fine. It's, like I said, better to start slow with things, be in the right setting, and with the right intention. And under these circumstances, I feel that the use of plant substances, entheogens, can highly benefit ourselves and our society today.
Yeah, that was totally epic. Thank you very much. Now let's transition from that right into legal and high success rate settings and sets where people can actually use these types of therapies for healing from addiction. So, for instance, the Bwiti, I think it's pronounced the Bwiti tribe in Africa, an indigenous tribe and people. They've been using the Iboga root with the alkaloid in there, Ibogaine, dissociative, I won't even say the H word. What did you call it?
Entheogen.
Dissociative. So anyways, that's a very difficult word. They've been taking this stuff at least for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they take it at religious ceremonies, and it's a rite of passage, and they use it to heal people from all sorts of physical and psychological and spiritual dis-eases. And so it's legal. It's not legal in America, but it's unregulated in Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and many other countries. So would that be a form of psychedelic shamanism? Because Ibogaine, the way they use it, at least at certain places, people do have those. I've heard some of the most beautiful spiritual experiences. Now, I've also heard many a tale of people having horrible visions and just not liking the experience, but mostly I've heard really good things, and all people saying pretty much from the good visuals that they would get, it's like a waking dream state of like kind of watching their life on a screen. All the good experiences people had were very similar to where they said they saw all the different traumatizing and stressful things in their life and that they did and that other people did, which led, it's hard to explain, but a full dissolving of the ego and then seeing lots of information that they didn't have access to before.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any experience with Ibogaine, but a similar drug is derived from some rainforest herbs, and it's called Ayahuasca. So Ayahuasca is actually two plants, the way they use it in the rainforest of South America, Peru mostly, but around there. There's one plant that is the vine of the little death, as it's called, Banisteriopsis caapi. And some people call that plant ayahuasca. But ayahuasca is actually the admixture of that and also another plant that's called chacruna. So chacruna actually contains DMT, dimethyltryptamine, that which Terence McKenna called the spirit molecule. And so what's interesting is that here's the rainforest with thousands of plants, tens of thousands of plants. And if you take the extract of either of these plants by itself, you don't experience much.
Wow.
The vine of the little death actually contains the MAO inhibitors that enable the DMT to be experienced long term. People smoke DMT because there's an enzyme in the body called monoamine oxidase, MAO, which takes it apart pretty quickly, which is why people have to smoke it, because it gets in your bloodstream, and they call it the businessman's lunch, because in about 15 minutes, that enzyme disables it. If you take something that inhibits that enzyme, an MAOI, monoamine oxidase inhibitor, then you can have like an 8 to 10 hour experience with it. And so those MAOIs are actually in, they're beta-carboline alkaloids that are in the Banisteriopsis caapi, the vine, that enable the DMT, the dimethyltryptamine in the chacruna, to have a long-term effect for 8 or 10 hours. So in their ceremony, you can experience a lot. The beta-carboline alkaloids themselves are slightly entheogenic, slightly psychedelic themselves. But mostly what they're doing is potentiating the DMT. That's the really active thing here. And I've taken ayahuasca several times, and people do have visions with it. And they're pretty consistent in what they see and experience. But I've had many friends that have actually gone to Peru and engaged in ayahuasca ceremonies there. Pretty much what I've heard throughout that is that it's a very positive experience. And because, for example, if you went to Peru to do that, you wouldn't just sit down and drink it. You would be prepared first. In traditional society, you would be prepared first by the ayahuasquero, the shaman of the village. And you might fast for a while, and you may spend some time alone for a while. And that was the case also of the Kumeyaay here in San Diego, using the cactus with the toloache. So in this ceremony, you open up and you experience. You connect with your spirit guides. In primitive cultures, you can't be an adult. You can't be a fully functioning being until, in fact, you are not alone, but you are with your spirit guides, your counsel, who are not in physical form. And the medicinal advantages and uses, for example, of ayahuasca, I have read accounts from medical students who have experienced firsthand an ayahuasquero taking the ayahuasca and, for example, having a client who had gallstones. And they both drink the tea and wait for it to come on. And then once they're both engaged in the experience, the shaman is actually able to enter his hands through the body of the client, take the gallbladder out, take it down to the river, and wash the gallstones out. Put the gallbladder back in, do some psychic surgery to reconnect it, do some psychic surgery to seal up the skin. And then there's actually still a couple of days of recovery. So it was a real surgery, but it was not done with a scalpel. And so this is, when it comes down to it, we are energy.
Before I forget, before we go on to the we are energy part, and we'll both remember that, but
that's right.
That I'm wondering if this sounds much like what Dr. Wayne Dyer had before he passed a few years ago. He said that he had a long range surgery from John of God in Brazil, maybe, and it was this long distance surgery, and then he was exhausted the next couple of days. It's the same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's like a very famous person that did this and had a great experience and wrote about it and has talked about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're all energy.
Yeah, so we're all energy. And our bodies, they look physical, but really, what is it made up? It's made up of cells. And what are the cells made up of? They're made up of atoms. And what are the atoms made up of? They're made up of basically a nucleus, which is protons and neutrons, and around the outside of that, the energy rings, Fermi levels, that we call electrons. But if you look at the protons, what are they made out of? They are made out of subatomic particles. So an element, an atom, is 99.999% space. If you looked at the so-called matter within the nucleus of the atom, protons or neutrons, you look at those, they are also themselves like a universe within itself, a solar system, if you will. They are also 99.999% space. So although things look solid, relatively, they are mostly space. And to be able to move through that space requires us to get into a state of consciousness where we are not acting as the physical being, but as the energy being. And so this kind of blows the Western linear mind. And we would tend to say, hey, that's impossible. So
this is quantum physics 101, though, right?
That's quantum physics 101. Yep, absolutely.
Proven,
yeah. In fact, even the electrons going around the atom are actually not even physical. Mass has a quality that, for example, in physics we say F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration. In other words, if a vehicle is traveling 60 miles an hour, in an hour it's going to travel 60 miles. And matter has that property that you can track it. Well, if you look at an electron in its orbit around the atom, it it it's not where it's supposed to be all the time. In fact, it sort of depends on if you're looking or not. And this is a little bit more of a stretch. If you're not looking, it may not even be there. If we close our eyes, what evidence is there that anything around us exists? And then we open our eyes and it's like, oh, there it is again. But was it there before? There's no evidence that it was. In other words, if you take a bowling ball and roll it down in a bowling alley, and you first put some powder on there that dusts it so that it can track the course of the ball, and you throw it down there, and you're watching, and then you close your eyes, and then you open them again, and then you look at the track of that ball. While you were looking, it's a straight line. While you weren't, it looks like a snake. What does that mean? An energy configuration, right? It didn't need to even be physical while you weren't looking. So it wasn't. Didn't bother. And this is a little bit hard for people to accept, to understand. But again, this is quantum physics. What's the sound of a tree falling in the woods if there's nobody there? Well, if there's nobody there, the woods doesn't even have to be there, let alone the tree falling. And these are things that, in our linear, everyday waking consciousness are not even things that we ponder, that we consider. But when we get into these altered states of consciousness, these are things that we question and questions that we get answers to. And it enlightens us so that we can become an enlightened being. And we can act as an enlightened being with a reverence for ourselves and for people and the world around us, which is the true benefit.
Every time in the past that I did these types of substances, whether it was mushrooms or LSD or even peyote mixed with San Pedro cactus, every time after I returned back to normal consciousness, it always gave me many different lessons, but some recurring ones, which were things like if my car was dirty and my bedroom and home was dirty, or it would just start to give me all these ideas. Oh, I need to be working out. I need to be having this clean. And then also I wouldn't want soda or beer or any of that kind of. Every time I would return to normal, I would want really pure, healthy things like water and whole foods, and it would just really give me lessons that if I took advantage of that and implemented some new things right off the bat, then I would improve my life because of it. But there are other times when I had bad trips because I was either in the city or with the wrong people. I never ever did any planning for the intention, for the setting, yes, but not the actual set regarding, the intentions regarding it. So, and a lot of the people the reason I learned about this stuff for addiction was when I was a counselor at that methadone program. I actually had patients there that had told me about Ibogaine, and I was like, whoa, that sounds trippy, and tell me how it works. And it was after a few years of working at that clinic and then hearing more or less the same version. They went to Mexico or Canada, did the Ibogaine experience, which the mechanisms of action, the plant pharmacology of it, helps to relieve opioid withdrawal and reboost your dopamine and help with post-acute withdrawal. It's really long-acting. It stays, I think, in your fat cells, nor Ibogaine, a metabolite, for many months. And so they would all tell me these same things. The people that took action immediately after getting those lessons and getting through the withdrawal, go home, if they started to change their life, change the people they're around, change whatever needed to be fixing and get momentum, then they could keep going great. But it was the people that did not do that. Those are the ones that got back on opioids, the ones that squandered their time post-Ibogaine treatment and just kept doing the same things, thinking the same way, etc. Nowadays, there's a biotech company, there's several actually. One in particular that I'm following is called MindMed. It has one of those Shark Tank investors, those venture capitalists, Kevin O'Leary backing it too. So it's got a lot of momentum and money and a great team behind it. They're right now, I think, in phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials for trying to get a compound called 18MC, basically FDA approved for opioid withdrawal. And they also have, so 18MC is a man-made derivative of Ibogaine, and they have structured it in a way to where it doesn't have the neurotoxic effects, but it also doesn't have the hallucinogenic effects. And I'm wondering just how, I think it's still going to be really effective just because the mechanisms of action can work so good to heal the brain. But if people aren't getting that waking dream state, mind expanding part of it, I'm wondering if the efficacy success rates are going to be the same or less. Maybe there'll be more. I have no idea. Another thing, too, is they're also, the same company and I think other companies, they're also doing trials for things like LSD or maybe even MDMA as an adjunct to psychotherapy. And there's this system they're creating called Albert, which is like a virtual counseling therapy interface system that is also going to be used in accordance with psychedelics. So this is hot stuff right now. That's why I wanted you to come on for this particular topic, because while some people may be afraid of it, while some people may be listening to this going, I can't believe they're talking about, quote, drugs on a recovery podcast, but this is just information, and it's not a prescription for people. Just because we're talking about this topic and having this discussion doesn't mean that we're saying everyone should go out and do this stuff. Not at all. But it's information. It's great to provide this type of stuff because there's a very large amount of people that are interested in it, and the stocks that are researching these medicines and these therapies, they're going way up right now. They're going way up because people are sick and tired of being physically sick, mentally sick, things with addiction. Like you were saying at the very beginning, people are more unhealthy now than ever before, and it's because first of all, our diets for the most part are crap. We're isolated, a lot of us, but also the inner work. A lot of people aren't going within and doing the inner work. So this is really valuable information, and people can get there by legally doing some of these medicines where they are legal. They can also do these mind-expanding things with meditation. Why don't we transition from this into achieving higher states of consciousness with the type of meditation that you do? And I know you don't go deep into the therapies, but what are some of the benefits that you've got? That's almost 50 years. That's 50 years of meditation.
I learned to do this in 1971.
That's 50 years. That's longer. That's 10 years. You've been meditating for 10 years longer than I've been alive. So what are some of the special powers, so to speak, or some of the things that it's helped you with?
Okay, good. Well, so
it's about inner peace, right? And just because that's what Prem Rawat talks about a lot, inner peace, the heart. The
peace you're looking for is inside yourself. That's his message. Mm-hmm. This is a guy that when I got into him in 1971, he had just turned 8 years old. His father was a teacher of this before himself. And in fact, his father's teacher was Sri Yukteswar, the same teacher as Paramahansa Yogananda, and some other, my first spiritual teacher, who was Kirpal Singh. It was a lineage. It was a message. It was a teaching, a practice of taking your senses and turning them within. We have 5 physical senses with which we can experience this physical world. Well, what happens when people die and then come back to life? Many people experience life after death experiences. I've had some of my students share their experience with that. And what's interesting is that these stories are all very, very similar. So what do they experience? They see something. In other words, people believe they're going to go to heaven when they die, perhaps, if they're good. And so how are you going to know you're in heaven and not in hell? Well, you must experience something. they tell the story that they're able to see something. They see the light. They go towards the light. And then they see maybe people that they knew in their life that have passed away. Maybe their relatives. They see something. So with what sense are they seeing that? Not these physical eyes. Mm-hmm. These physical eyes are not open. These physical eyes are not functioning. These physical eyes aren't sending anything through the optic nerve to the brain with which it could compute and relate to that data. That's all not happening. So we have something called the third eye, which is, just above the eyebrows in the middle there. In India, they have this little red dot that they put there. That's where the pineal gland is behind that. And we call that the third eye. And so what Jesus said is, if thine eye be single, thy body will be filled with light. So what was he talking about? He must have had that experience, right? So we have that sense. People hear music, right? The people are playing harps, heavenly music, right? So with what sense are they hearing the music? Not these physical ears. That sense is shut down in our physical body. So we have that experience. People might experience love. They might experience unconditional love, right? And so the thing is, if we can experience that after death and then relate that experience when we are revived and come back to life, the question I ask my students is, if we have those senses available to us then, do we not have them available to us now? And so the deal is, yes, we do. It's all about accessing that experience, accessing the use of those senses, being able to see that light with the third eye, being able to hear that music, that heavenly music, if you will, divine music. I heard that music when I was a kid, growing up in Michigan. I would go underwater in Lake Huron, and I would hear what my first teacher called the sound current of the universe. It sounded like a locust, kind of a sound. And it was like, where the hell's that coming from? Right? Does underwater have a different world sound than above water? And it was just that it was quiet down there so you could hear it. You can also hear that. I heard that this morning. I meditated this morning. I practiced. And I heard that. I saw that light this morning. I felt that unconditional divine love this morning. That's what my teacher turned me on to. It's taking your awareness, and instead of trying to use your physical senses outside to experience the physical world, we're going to take our spirit senses and turn them within and experience that spirit world, that energy world, the experience of our own being, which is God. And it's God awareness. That's why we call them entheogens. En means within. Theo means God. Experiencing God within yourself. And the experience of God within yourself is unconditional love. Unconditional means Buddha, for example, was said to have sat under the Bodhi tree until what was happening around him did not matter. Okay? It was raining. So what? It was really hot. So what? He saw his friend's dog get run over. So what? It would have been by an ox cart in those days. And when he was in a state of experience to where what was going around him did not alter his experience, did not pull him away from that feeling of unconditional love. That's transformational, because a lot of times we rely on our external experiences for our joy, for our happiness. I'm planning a picnic tomorrow, and it's like, oh God, it rained. So because it rained, it wrecked my experience. I'm going fishing, and I'm standing there all day, and I don't even get a bite. I'm not happy. So my happiness, my joy is conditional. It's weather conditional. It's whether the fish are biting conditional. But if you're connected with that unconditional experience within yourself, And I'm not talking about a belief. I'm talking about a direct experience. Somebody can tell you the ocean water out here is 72 degrees, which it gets in the summer sometimes, and be like, hoo-hoo. I'm not probably going to believe that. But if I go down, jump in the ocean, I can experience whether that's true or not. I don't have to rely on somebody's information. Experience, you can't argue with. It's your experience. And you can actually experience this unconditional love, joy, and peace within yourself that is not conditional to external circumstances like Buddha. That is transcendental. That is transformational. Because once you're not tied to external circumstances for your peace, joy, and connection, then you can relax. And you can know that it's all good. Whatever experience you're getting is for your own benefit. And it may be tough stuff, right? It's not all roses. Sometimes it's the thorns. But we just come into this state of understanding that you don't get roses without thorns. But you don't have to dwell on the thorns. You can focus on the roses and the smell of the roses, which goes through the limbic region of your brain and allows you to experience love. Okay? And so that's what this is about. It's about an experience. It's not about a belief. Okay? It's not something you can learn. It's something you can only experience. And that experience, like the Ibogaine, if you have that experience, and then if you take action on that, then you can have benefit.
Well, that's probably a good place to stop because my brain is like, that's drinking. I thought it was drinking from a fire hose on some of Chris and I's interviews. That right there was drinking from a fire hose. This is going to be fun to type up the show notes page for this episode. Dad, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can people, if they want to learn more, to sign up for this psychedelic shamanism?
Yeah, so I've been teaching this for years. And so our school, selfhealschool.com, we have a website. And on that website, you can actually sign up for a bunch of different classes. We teach nutrition, aromatherapy, herbal medicine, prosperity consciousness, lots of different beneficial topics. But I also teach this psychedelic shamanism mini-series. And since we're in lockdown now, I am actually making this mini-series available as a pre-recorded package. For $80, you can sign up for and get a very comprehensive booklet, and also Class 1, which is 2.5 hours, and Class 2, which is 2.5 hours. And you can sign up for that on the classes page for selfhealschool.com.
Thanks so much, Dad. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was fun.
Love you.
Love you too.